The message traveled across the galaxy for 3 weeks before it reached Earth. It was a distress call, desperate and afraid. The Galactic Harmony Council needed help. They were dying. Ambassador N stood in the communications center of Harmony Station, his blue skin pale with worry. Around him, screens showed the same terrible images: planets burning, cities destroyed, millions of his people dead or missing. The void swarm had come and nothing could stop it. The swarm was not like other enemies. It did not want land or resources. It wanted to consume everything. It ate entire worlds, taking the genetic material of every living thing and using it to grow stronger. In 3 months, 12 council worlds had fallen. Billions were dead. "We need warriors," and said to the council leaders on the screen. "We need heroes to fight for us." The council agreed. They sent their message to every corner of known space. They promised rewards, honor, and glory to any species that would help them. They hoped for champions, brave souls who would fight for justice and peace. Earth answered, and did not know much about Earth. The planet had only been discovered 6 months ago, far on the edge of council space. The reports said it was a place where everything tried to kill everything else. The council had sent peaceful greetings but had not expected much from such a primitive world. Now Earth was sending soldiers. The transport ship landed in Harmony Station's main dock, and went to greet them, hopping to see noble warriors or skilled defenders. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. 5 humans walked down the ramp. They wore black armor covered in weapons. Their eyes were hard and empty. They moved like predators, scanning everything around them for threats. These were not heroes. These were something else. "Captain Menu, Wraith Company," said the leader. He was tall and thin, with a face that showed no emotion. "We're here to kill your swarm." And tried to smile. "Welcome to Harmony Station. We are grateful for Earth's assistance. I am Ambassador N. I will be your liaison." Menu looked at him with those cold eyes. "We don't need a liaison. We need intelligence on the enemy. Troop movements, behavior patterns, biological data, everything you have." "Of course," N said. "But first, let me introduce you to our military commanders. We have a strategic plan." "Your strategic plan lost you 12 worlds," interrupted a woman with sharp features. "We'll make our own plan." And learned their names quickly. Lieutenant Park was the team medic, though her specialty was chemical weapons. Sergeant handled explosives and seemed to enjoy it too much. Corporal Sarahan barely spoke, just watched everything with predator eyes. Private Lee was the youngest, but he had scars on his hands that told stories of violence. The ambassador took them to the strategy room where Galactic Defense Force commanders waited. The GDF officers were experienced leaders from 7 different species. They had spent weeks planning the defense of Council worlds. Captain Menu listened to their presentation for 10 minutes before standing up. "This won't work," he said simply. General X, a large reptilian officer, bristled. "Excuse me, we have defended the Council for 2 centuries. "And you've lost 12 worlds in 3 months, Menu said. His voice was calm, like he was discussing the weather. "Your tactics assume the enemy thinks like you. It doesn't. The swarm is a hive mind. It learns from every battle. Your defensive positions, your evacuation protocols, your honor in combat. The swarm doesn't care about any of that." "Then what do you suggest?" General X demanded. Stepped forward, opening a case. Inside were vials of different colored liquids. "We study how it feeds. We poison what it eats. We make it hurt itself." The room went silent. Finally, an officer from the bird-like species spoke. "That would violate the biological weapons convention of—" "We're not part of your convention," said with a cold smile. "And your convention won't matter when you're all dead." And felt sick. He pulled up the files Earth had sent about the Wraith Company. As he read, his hands began to shake. Captain Menu had led 43 combat missions. His success rate was 100%. His casualty rate among enemies was also 100%. He had once destroyed an entire city block to eliminate 12 targets. Lieutenant Park had been removed from standard military service after creating chemical weapons that Earth's own government considered too dangerous to use. She had joined Special Operations instead. Sergeant held the record for most explosives used in a single operation. He had once collapsed a mountain on an enemy base. Corporal Sorahan had 300 confirmed kills as a sniper. Her psychological evaluation said she showed concerning lack of emotional response to combat stress. Private Lee had been recruited from prison, where he was serving time for assault. The military had given him a choice: rot in a cell or use his violence for them. These were not heroes, these were killers. Earth had sent its monsters. That night and found Captain Minu on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "I read your files," the ambassador said quietly. "I need to ask you something." "Ask." "Why did Earth send you? Why not send your best people, your diplomats, your peacemakers, your actual heroes?" Minu turned to look at him. For the first time, something like emotion crossed his face. It might have been sadness. "Earth doesn't have heroes, Ambassador," he said. "We have survivors. Do you know what it's like on our world? We have animals that can kill with a single bite, diseases that wipe out millions. We have weather that destroys cities. And worst of all, we have each other. Humans have been killing humans since we learned to pick up rocks." "That's terrible," and whispered. "That's life," Minu corrected. "Your people evolved on gentle worlds. You learned cooperation because you could afford to. We learned to fight because we had to. Every human alive is descended from killers and survivors. It's in our blood." "So Earth sent you because—" "Because we're what you need," Minu said. "Not what you want, not what you hoped for, but what you need to survive." He looked back at the stars. "The swarm is a predator, Ambassador. To kill a predator, you need something more dangerous. You need us." And left the observation deck feeling cold inside. He wondered if saving the council would be worth the price. He wondered what would happen when the swarm was defeated and Earth's monsters had nothing left to fight. He wondered if the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. But the void swarm was coming and the council was dying. They had no choice now. They had called for heroes. Earth had answered with monsters. The colony world of Prime had 2 days to live, maybe less. The planet housed 40 million people spread across beautiful crystal cities. They had lived in peace for 300 years. Now, the void swarm was coming to eat them all. Captain Minu stood on the bridge of the GDF cruiser, watching the tactical display. Red dots showed swarm forces approaching. There were thousands of them, maybe millions. Blue dots showed the defense fleet. There were not enough. "Standard evacuation protocol," General X said over the communication channel. "We establish perimeter defense while civilian transports escape. We hold the line for 72 hours. "You won't last 12 hours, Minu said flatly. "We have our duty," the general began. Minu cut the channel. He turned to his team, gathered around a separate display. "What do we know about how the swarm feeds?" Pulled up biological scans. "The swarm consumes organic matter and integrates the genetic information. It learns from what it eats. That's why it's getting stronger. It's absorbing the DNA of every species it kills." "So we poison its food," Minu said. "Already working on it," opened her case of chemicals. "I need fresh swarm samples. The more recent, the better." Grinned. "I can get you samples. Might blow up a few things in the process." "Blow up whatever you need," Minu said. He looked at Sara. "I need you to find the cluster nodes. The swarm has command points coordinating the attack. Kill those and the rest will scatter." Sora nodded. She never spoke much. She didn't need to. Minu turned to, "You're with me. We're going to draw them in." The young soldier smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Finally." They deployed to prime surface while the GDF tried to organize evacuations. The crystal cities were in chaos. People were screaming, running, trying to escape. The swarm would be here in hours. The Wraith Company didn't go to the cities. They went to the mining district on the planet's edge. It was empty, abandoned, worthless. Perfect. Set charges here, here, and here, Minyu said, pointing at the old mining tunnels. We want controlled collapse, not random explosions. Study the structures with the eye of an artist. Give me 3 hours. You have 2. While worked, set up her laboratory in an abandoned processing plant. She wore protective gear and worked with chemicals that made the air shimmer. Sora climbed to the highest point in the district, a communications tower that gave her a view of everything. Helped Minyu rig the entire area with traps. The swarm arrived on schedule. They came from the sky in black waves, creatures of nightmare with too many teeth and limbs. They flowed across the ground like a living flood. The GDF forces engaged them at the cities, trying to buy time for evacuations. But a large portion of the swarm broke off and headed for the mining district. Minyu had made sure of that. He had set fires, created noise, made the district impossible to ignore. They're coming to us, said, watching the black mass approach. Good, Minyu replied. Get ready. The first wave hits traps. Explosions rip through the tunnels, dropping tons of rock on the swarm creatures. Hundreds died instantly, but thousands more kept coming. Sora began firing from her tower. Each shot killed a cluster node, and each dead node caused dozens of swarm creatures to lose coordination. They stumbled, confused, before the hive mind assigned new controllers. Engaged the ones that got through. He fought with brutal efficiency, using knives and bare hands. The swarm creatures were strong but was faster and meaner. He killed them up close, smiling the whole time. Minyu coordinated everything, calling targets and timing. When the swarm adapted to traps, he changed the pattern. When they tried to flank, Sora was already targeting their new position. When they overwhelmed one area, was there to hold the line. And all the while, the swarm was feeding on their own dead. After 6 hours of fighting, emerged from her laboratory. She carried a spray device filled with clear liquid. It's done, she said. We need to contaminate the bodies. They spread chemical across every dead swarm creature they could find. Then they retreated, leaving the bodies behind. Fresh swarm forces arrived and did what they always did, consumed their fallen to recycle the biomass. Nothing happened immediately. The swarm kept attacking. The GDF was losing ground at the cities. General X called for retreat. Then, 12 hours after the contamination, the swarm began to die. It started slowly, a few creatures stumbling, then dozens, then thousands. Poison spread through the hive mind like fire. The swarm had eaten its own dead, and those dead had been full of chemical weapons designed to destroy them from inside. The creatures began attacking each other. The hive mind fragmented, confused, dying. Within 24 hours, the swarm forces on Prime were gone. Dead or fled, it didn't matter. The planet was saved. The cost was 40,000 civilian casualties. Terrible, but not the millions that would have died. The GDF celebrated a victory. But when General X came to thank the Wraith Company, he found them quietly packing their gear. There was no celebration. They looked tired. You saved this world, the general said. We did our job, Minyu replied. The general hesitated. Your methods, they were effective. But the biological weapons, the traps in civilian areas, using yourselves as bait, these things violate council law. Looked up from her chemical case. Would you rather be alive and offended, or dead and proper? That's not the point. That's exactly the point, interrupted. You play by rules that your enemy doesn't know or care about. The swarm doesn't surrender. It doesn't negotiate, it eats. So we made it eat poison. But at what cost to our principles? the general demanded. Sara spoke for the first time since they had landed. Her voice was quiet and cold. Principles don't matter when you're dead. Ambassador and arrived then, looking shaken. He had watched the battle from orbit. He had seen what the humans did. You fought like them, he said to Minu. Like the swarm. You used their nature against them. You were just as brutal, just as cruel. Minu looked at him with those empty eyes. Yes. How can you be proud of that? I'm not proud, Minu said. I'm alive. My team is alive. 40 million people on this planet are alive. Pride has nothing to do with it. But the things you did are what we've always done, Minu interrupted. You want to know why Earth sent us? Because we understand what you don't. Survival isn't pretty, it isn't honorable, it's just survival. On Earth, we learned that millions of years ago. Everything on our planet is trying to kill everything else. We became the best at it. That's not something to be proud of. It's just what we are. And felt sick. Then what's the difference between you and the swarm? Answered his young voice hard. We don't eat what we kill. The team finished packing. They prepared to move to the next battle, the next world that needed saving. Behind them, Prime began to recover. People emerged from shelters. They started rebuilding. They would live. But they would never forget the monsters that saved them. General X filed a formal complaint with the Council about human combat methods. Ambassador and added his own concerns. Other species heard about what happened on Prime and were afraid. The Wraith Company didn't care. They had more worlds to save, more battles to fight, more ways to horrify their allies while keeping them alive. Captain Minu looked at the star charts showing other worlds under swarm attack. So many people dying, so many planets burning. The GDF couldn't save them all, not with their rules and honor and proper tactics. But maybe monsters could. Where next? Asked. Minu pointed at a red marker on the chart. Here, they need us. The Wraith Company moved to their next mission. Behind them, the galaxy began to whisper about Earth's soldiers, about what they had done to win, about whether saving the galaxy was worth the price of letting monsters fight on their behalf. The Wraith Company saved 6 more worlds in 2 months. Each victory came with horror stories that spread across the galaxy. On 4, collapsed an entire mountain range to bury a swarm nest. It worked. It also destroyed ancient cultural sites that had existed for 10,000 years. On Meridian Station, released airborne chemicals that killed every swarm creature in the sector. The chemicals also made the survivors sick for weeks. Children still had nightmares about the smell. On Prime, Sara eliminated 87 swarm cluster nodes in 12 hours. She did it from positions that should have been impossible. Some of those positions had been in schools and hospitals. The aliens didn't like knowing that human snipers had been in their safe places. The Council was grateful. The Council was also terrified. They save us, then make us wish we'd never asked for their help, one ambassador said in a closed meeting. Ambassador and attended these meetings now. He had become the unofficial expert on human behavior. They are effective, he admitted. More effective than any force we have, but they fight without mercy, without honor, without restraint. Then what do we do? Asked another delegate. We still need them. The swarm is still out there. They needed the humans. That was the problem. The galaxy had become dependent on Earth's monsters. Then everything changed. Private Lee disappeared during a battle on Vortex Station. The team had been clearing out swarm forces from a civilian shelter. Went in first, as always. He never came out. When the rest of the team entered, they found only dead swarm creatures and blood. Blood. He's gone, Sora said, checking her scanner. Life signs negative. Captain Minu stared at the empty room. Track the swarm retreat vector. Find which direction they took him. Captain said carefully, if they took him, he's already dead. The swarm integrates captives within hours. He's part of the hive mind now. I said find him. They tracked the swarm force to a processing ship leaving the system. Intelligence confirmed the ship was heading back to a swarm staging area 3 days away. The GDF told them to let it go. Was lost. That was the cost of war. Captain Minu gathered his team in private. "We're going after him," he said. "They'll court-martial us," pointed out. "This isn't authorized. We'll be stealing a ship, leaving our assigned sector, abandoning our mission." "I don't care." "He might already be dead," Sora said quietly. "Then we bring back his body," Minu replied. His voice was cold as always, but something burned behind his eyes. "We don't leave our people behind. Ever." They stole a GDF scout ship. It wasn't hard. Security was focused on keeping enemies out, not keeping allies in. They chased the swarm processing ship across 3 systems, finally catching it at the staging area. The staging area was a nightmare. Dozens of swarm ships clustered around a small moon. Millions of creatures moved between them. It was suicide to go in. They went in anyway. Rigged the scout ship with explosives. One pass. We get in, we get him, we get out. The ship will cover our escape with a very big distraction. Sora identified which ship held prisoners. Her scanner picked up human life signs, faint but there. He's alive, barely. They boarded through an airlock melted open with acid. Inside, the ship was organic, alive. The walls pulsed. The air was thick and wrong. They moved through corridors of flesh and bone, killing swarm creatures quietly. They found the integration chamber deep in the ship's center. Was there, suspended in some kind of cocoon. Black veins spread across his skin. His eyes were open but empty. "He's been assimilated," Sora said, checking her medical scanner. "The hive mind has him." Pushed forward, already pulling chemicals from her pack. "Not all the way. There's still brain activity separate from the swarm connection. We can save him." How asked. "Painfully." They cut down and carried him, running through the ship. Alarms screamed. The swarm knew they were there now. Creatures poured from every direction. Fought rear guard, using grenades and controlled explosions to cover their retreat. Sora picked off targets with her rifle. Minu led them forward, making split-second decisions about which corridor to take, which door to breach. They reached the scout ship with swarm creatures right behind them. Triggered the remote detonations, and half the enemy ship exploded. They launched, flying through debris and angry swarm vessels. Worked on in the cargo bay. She injected him with chemicals that made him scream. The screams were good. They meant he was still human enough to feel pain. "The swarm infection is deep," she said, not looking up from her work. "It's integrated with his nervous system. I have to burn it out." "Will he survive?" Minu asked. "I don't know." For 3 days worked. She didn't sleep, didn't eat. She synthesized new chemicals from the swarm samples they'd collected, trying to find something that would kill the infection without killing. The young soldier suffered. He screamed when the chemicals burned through him. He thrashed against his restraints. Sometimes he spoke in voices that weren't his own, the swarm trying to maintain control. Sora and took turns holding him down. Minu watched from the doorway, his face showing no emotion. But he never left. For 3 days, the captain stood guard while his medic fought to save a man who might already be lost. Ambassador and found them when they returned to Harmony Station. He was angry, ready to demand answers about their unauthorized mission. Then he saw. The young soldier was alive but changed. The black veins were gone, but scars remained. His eyes had seen things no one should see. He looked older, harder. "You saved him," and whispered. "Saved him," Minu corrected. The ambassador looked at. She sat against the wall, exhausted, stained with chemicals and blood. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling slightly. "Why?" and asked. "He was one soldier. The mission you abandoned could have saved thousands. Why risk everything for one person?" Looked at him with red, tired eyes. Because he's ours. That doesn't make sense. We're human, she interrupted. We're brutal, we're cruel. We use weapons you consider war crimes. We blow up mountains and poison the air and kill without mercy, but we never abandon each other. Never. She looked at, recovering in the medical bay. That's what makes us different from the swarm. They sacrifice individuals for the hive. We sacrifice everything for individuals. You don't understand that because you've never had to. And didn't understand. Not then. But he watched the team over the following days. He saw how they cared for, taking turns sitting with him as he recovered. He saw bring him food. Saw Sora quietly clean his weapons so they'd be ready when he was. Saw Minu update him on team status every day, treating him like he'd never been gone. These monsters, these brutal killers, loved each other. The GDF command debated court-martialing the Wraith Company for their unauthorized mission. Many species demanded it, but others pointed out that the team had destroyed a swarm staging area, killed thousands of enemies, and rescued valuable intelligence about swarm integration processes. In the end, they issued a formal reprimand and nothing more. The galaxy needed the humans too much to punish them. Returned to duty 2 weeks later. He was quieter now, more serious. The swarm had touched his mind, and he remembered things he wished he could forget. "You should have left me," he said to Captain Minu one night. "No. I was already gone. You risked the whole team." "We don't leave our people behind," Minu said. "That's not negotiable. That's not up for debate. You're part of this team. That means we come for you, always." Looked at his captain, at this man who showed no emotion, who made brutal choices without hesitation, who treated soldiers like chess pieces. This man had risked everything to save him. "Thank you," said quietly. Minu nodded once and left. Ambassador and watched from outside, having come to deliver new mission orders. He finally understood something about humans. They were monsters, yes. They were brutal and cruel and terrifying. But they were also loyal beyond reason. They would die for each other without question. The galaxy had called for heroes and gotten monsters. But maybe, and thought, monsters with loyalty were more valuable than heroes without it. The war continued. The swarm still threatened. And the Wraith Company kept fighting, kept saving worlds, kept horrifying their allies. But now, when aliens whispered about Earth soldiers, they whispered about this too, about the team that went into hell to save one of their own. The monsters had hearts after all, they just didn't show them often. The Void Swarm learned. That was the terrifying thing. Every battle made it smarter, faster, deadlier. It learned to avoid explosive traps. It learned to counter chemical weapons. It learned to hide its cluster nodes from Sora's targeting. It learned to overwhelm close combat style. It learned to predict Captain Minu's tactics. The swarm had adapted. Then it struck everywhere at once. 5 core council worlds came under attack simultaneously. The GDF scattered their forces, trying to defend all of them. It wasn't enough. Reports flooded in, cities burning, millions dying, defenses collapsing. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. Ambassador and attended, watching as the delegates argued and panicked. "We need to evacuate the core worlds," one suggested. "And abandon billions of people," another shouted. "We have no choice. The swarm is too strong." The humans and interrupted. Everyone turned to look at him. "Send the Wraith Company, they can." "Do what?" General X demanded. "They're 5 soldiers. We're losing 5 entire worlds. What can they possibly do?" Captain Minu answered that question by walking into the council chamber without permission. Security tried to stop him, but he ignored them. He walked straight to the central display showing the 5 burning worlds. "We have a plan," he said. "A plan to save 5 worlds." The general sounded skeptical. "No," Minu said, "a plan to end the war." He activated his own data display. It showed something that made the entire council go silent. Intelligence maps, battle data, analysis that had taken the Wraith Company weeks to compile. The swarm has a central hive, Minu explained. Everything connects back to it. The hive cluster on designation 07. It's where the hive mind originates. Kill that and the entire swarm collapses. We know about the hive cluster, General X said. It's a fortress world. Trillions of swarm creatures defend it. Sending a fleet there would be suicide. Yes, Minu agreed. Which is why we're not sending a fleet, we're sending us. The council chamber erupted in noise. Impossible, crazy, suicide. 5 soldiers against a fortress world. It was absurd. It won't work, the general said flatly. It will, said, stepping forward with her chemical case. I've been studying the swarm for months. I've created something new. A virus that targets the hive mind communication system. If we can upload it directly to the central node, the entire swarm network will fragment. They'll turn on each other. How do you upload it directly? And asked, though he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. We go there, said with his cold smile. We blow a hole in their defenses. We plant the virus. We leave. The council will never authorize this mission, the general said. Captain Minu looked at him with those empty eyes. We're not asking for authorization. They left that night. They stole a decommissioned council warship scheduled for scrapping, one old enough that its disappearance might not be noticed immediately. Minu sent out a coded message to other humans serving in support roles throughout council space. 50 humans answered the call. Engineers, pilots, technicians, anyone willing to risk everything for an impossible mission. They weren't soldiers like the Wraith Company, but they were human. That meant they understood what needed to be done. They retrofitted the old warship with weapons the Council had banned. Human weapons, rail guns that violated energy weapon treaties, nuclear missiles that violated mass destruction protocols, special explosives that violated common sense. The journey to designation 07 took 4 days. They used that time to prepare, synthesized her virus, working without sleep. Sara trained the volunteer snipers, teaching them to think like predators, drilled the close combat teams until they moved like one organism, turned the entire ship into a massive bomb, rigged to detonate on his command. Captain Minu planned every detail. He knew most of them would die. He knew the odds were impossible, but he also knew the alternative, watching the council fall, watching billions die, watching the swarm consume everything. This is a one-way trip, he told the volunteers. No one will remember what we do here. The council will probably condemn us if we succeed. We're throwing away our lives for people who fear us. A young engineer named spoke up. They fear us because we're willing to do what they can't. That's fine. Let them fear us. Let them hate us, as long as they survive. The others nodded. They understood. They were human. They knew how to be monsters so others didn't have to be. The assault on designation 07 began at dawn, though the hive world had no sun. It was a dark place, covered in organic structures that pulsed with sick light. Billions of swarm creatures crawled across its surface. Ships filled its orbit like a swarm of insects. The human warship dropped out of faster-than-light travel right in the middle of it all. All weapons free, Captain Minu ordered. Make them notice us. The ship's illegal weapons opened fire. Rail guns tore through swarm vessels. Nuclear missiles vaporized defensive positions. The humans fought with terrifying efficiency, every shot calculated for maximum damage. The swarm noticed them. How could it not? Thousands of enemy ships converged on the lone warship. They attacked from all sides, trying to overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. Grinned as explosions rocked the ship. They're taking the bait. Sara, clear us a path. Sara and her team of volunteer snipers targeted the swarm's coordination nodes. Each kill created chaos in the enemy formation. The swarm adapted quickly, but for precious seconds, there were gaps in their defense. Boarding teams now, Minu ordered. led 20 humans in armored suits straight into the chaos. They used boarding pods to launch from the warship into the nearest swarm vessels. Their job was simple: cause mayhem, keep the enemy confused, create more gaps. It was suicide, everyone knew it, they did it anyway. The warship punched through the orbital defenses, trading hits with thousands of enemy vessels. Hull breaches spread, fires burned, people died. But they kept going. They crashed onto the hive world's surface, the ship plowing through organic structures and swarm creatures. Had calculated the impact trajectory perfectly. They ended up less than a kilometer from the central hive node. "Everyone out," Minyu shouted. "Sora with me, everyone else hold this position, buy us 10 minutes. The volunteers formed a defensive perimeter around the crashed ship. They fought with everything they had: guns, explosives, bare hands when ammunition ran out. The swarm poured toward them in endless waves. Captain Minyu led his core team toward the hive node. It was a massive structure, organic and wrong, pulsing with the thoughts of trillions of creatures. They fought through waves of defenders, each step bought with blood and bullets. Sora covered them with her rifle, each shot perfectly placed. Blew holes in walls and enemies alike, clearing a path. Fought hand-to-hand with swarm creatures, his movements brutal and efficient. They reached the node's center, pulled out a data spike containing her virus. "I need 30 seconds to upload," she said. "You'll get it," Minyu promised. The swarm realized what they were doing. Every creature on the planet seemed to converge on their position. The team fought like demons, holding the line while worked. 20 seconds. Ran out of explosives and switched to using dead swarm creatures as improvised weapons. 25 seconds. Sora's rifle overheated. She drew a pistol and kept firing. 28 seconds. Went down, swarmed by creatures. He kept fighting from the ground, refusing to die. 30 seconds. "It's done," shouted. "Everyone back to the ship," Minyu ordered. "Trigger the detonation sequence." They ran, dragged himself up and ran. The volunteers still alive ran. The ship's engines, rigged to explode, began their countdown. Behind them, the hive node started to scream. The virus spread through the swarm network at the speed of thought. The hive mind fragmented, pieces of it fighting other pieces. Swarm creatures turned on each other, no longer controlled by a central intelligence. The team reached the one intact escape pod and launched just as the ship exploded. The explosion was massive, nuclear level, vaporizing everything within kilometers. The escape pod flew through the chaos of a swarm turning on itself. They watched through the viewport as the hive world tore itself apart, trillions of creatures killing each other in mindless rage. Captain Minyu did a 50 humans had come on this mission. 13 were in the escape pod. 37 had died to save the galaxy. "Sir," one of the surviving engineers said quietly, "communication from the council. They're asking what happened." Minyu looked at the dying hive world on the. "Tell them the swarm is finished. Tell them Earth's monsters did what had to be done." The escape pod limped toward council space, carrying the survivors of an impossible mission. Behind them, the void swarm's central hive collapsed, and across the galaxy, isolated swarm clusters lost their coordination. The war was over. The price was 37 human lives. Earth's monsters had saved the galaxy again. The escape pod drifted through space for 2 days before a council rescue ship found them. The Wraith Company and the 10 surviving volunteers were taken to Harmony Station. They were placed in isolation while the council decided what to do with them. Across the galaxy, the void swarm was dying. Without the central hive to coordinate them, the remaining clusters fought each other or fled into deep space. The GDF easily eliminated the scattered survivors. In 3 weeks, the threat that had killed billions was reduced to nothing. The council world celebrated. Parades filled the streets. Monuments were built to honor the dead. The nightmare was over. But in the council chambers, a different conversation was happening. They stole a warship, one delegate argued. They violated 17 treaties with their weapons. They conducted an unauthorized military operation. These are crimes. They saved us, another countered. Without them, we'd all be dead. That doesn't excuse. Yes, it does, Ambassador stood, his voice shaking with emotion. 37 humans died to save us. They knew the mission was suicide. They went anyway, and were debating whether to punish the survivors. General X spoke carefully. The ambassador is correct. However, we must consider the precedent. If we allow such actions without consequence, what message does that send? It sends the message that we're grateful, and said, that we value survival over procedure. The debate raged for days. Some species wanted the humans tried for war crimes. Others wanted them celebrated as heroes. Most just wanted them gone, sent back to Earth where they couldn't frighten anyone anymore. In isolation, the Wraith Company waited. They had expected this. They knew the galaxy would never truly accept them. They'll probably execute us, said without much concern, or at least lock us up forever. Maybe, Captain Minu said. He sat cleaning his weapons as calm as always. Doesn't matter, the job is done. Looked exhausted, she hadn't slept properly since the mission. We saved them and they hate us for it. They don't hate us, Sora said quietly. They fear us, it's different. Still recovering from his wounds, laughed bitterly. Same result, we're monsters to them. We are monsters, Minu said simply. We've always known that. They needed monsters. We answered, that's enough. 3 weeks after their return, the council reached a decision. They would grant full pardons to all humans involved in the final mission. There would be no trials, no punishments. But they requested, politely but firmly, that Earth limit its military presence in council space. They were being asked to leave, save the galaxy, then shown the door. Ambassador and came to deliver the news personally. He looked ashamed. I argued against this, he said. I told them you deserved better. We deserve what we get, Minu replied. We're not offended, Ambassador. We understand. I don't understand, and said. You sacrificed everything for us, and we repay you with exile. Not exile, corrected. Distance. You want us far enough away that you can sleep at night. That's fair, we scare you. You do, and admitted. But I've come to understand why. May I ask you something I've wondered since you arrived? Ask. What are you truly? Monsters or heroes? I've seen you commit terrible acts and make incredible sacrifices. You're brutal but loyal, cruel but caring. I can't reconcile these contradictions. Lieutenant stood and walked to the window overlooking Harmony Station. Thousands of aliens moved through the corridors, living their lives, safe because the swarm was gone. We're human, she said softly. We're both monsters and heroes depending on what's needed. Your species evolved on worlds where cooperation was rewarded. You learned to build societies based on trust and honor. That's beautiful. We respect that. She turned to face him. But Earth is different. Everything there wants to kill everything else. We have predators that hunt in packs, diseases that wipe out entire populations, whether that destroys cities. And worst of all, we have each other. Humans have been fighting humans since we learned to use tools. We've committed genocides. We've built weapons to destroy our own planet. We know cruelty because we invented it. That sounds terrible, and whispered. It is, agreed. But it also made us survivors. Every human alive today is descended from the ones who were ruthless enough, smart enough, brutal enough to survive. That's in our DNA. We can't turn it off. We don't want to turn it off because it keeps us alive. So you embrace being monsters. Captain Minu spoke up. We embrace whatever we need to be. On Earth, being a monster keeps you alive. But being only a monster gets you killed by other monsters. So we learn to be both. We protect our own. We fight for each other. We never abandon our people. That's the hero part. but we'll use any tactic, any weapon, any method to win. That's the monster part. You choose which one you need to be, and said, understanding. No, corrected. We're always both, at the same time. That's what humans are. And was silent for a long moment. I wish we had never needed you. I wish the swarm had never come. I wish you could have stayed the heroes you might have been. We were never going to be heroes, Ambassador, Minyu said. Earth doesn't make heroes, it makes survivors. You called for champions and we answered with the only thing we had ourselves. Monsters with loyalty, killers with honor, predators with hearts. That's humanity. The Wraith Company prepared to return to Earth. They packed their weapons, their gear, their memories of battles fought and lives saved. The 10 surviving volunteers joined them, heading home to a planet that would barely acknowledge what they'd done. Before they left, something unexpected happened. Council delegates from 7 different species came to the docking bay. They didn't make speeches. They just stood in respectful silence as the humans boarded their transport. General X was among them. He saluted Captain Minyu. The captain returned it. I didn't agree with your methods, the general said. I still don't, but I'm alive because of them. My people are alive, thank you. Minyu nodded once. That was enough. The transport launched, carrying Earth's monsters home. Behind them, the galaxy breathed easier. The swarm was gone. Peace had returned. Life would go on. But 6 months later, something interesting began happening. Council species started sending quiet requests to Earth's government. Not public requests, those would have caused panic. Private requests, kept secret from most citizens. They wanted human military advisors, trainers for special forces units, consultants on unconventional warfare. They wanted to learn from the monsters. Earth agreed. Small teams of human soldiers deployed to various council worlds. They taught aliens how to think like predators, how to fight without honor when necessary, how to survive by any means required. The galaxy was learning that sometimes you needed monsters. Captain Minyu retired from active service and took a position training Council special forces. He taught them tactics that made their commanders uncomfortable but kept them alive. Lieutenant opened a research facility on a Council medical station, developing both cures and weapons. Her work saved millions and could kill billions. She slept fine with that contradiction. Sergeant became a demolitions instructor, teaching aliens that sometimes the best solution was to blow everything up and start over. Corporal Sora trained Council snipers, turning them into silent hunters who struck from impossible positions. Private led close combat courses, teaching aliens that sometimes you had to get your hands dirty, literally and metaphorically. They were still monsters, but they were the galaxy's monsters now, standing guard in the darkness so others could live in the light. Ambassador and visited Captain Minyu a year after the swarm's defeat. They stood in a training facility, watching human instructors teach alien soldiers how to fight dirty. I used to think you were the worst humanity had to offer, and said, now I understand you're the best at what we needed most. We're not the best or worst, Minyu replied. We're just necessary. Is that enough for you, being necessary but not loved? Minyu watched his former team members working with their students, patiently explaining the ethics of chemical warfare, gleefully demonstrating creative uses of explosives, Sora teaching patience and precision, showing the value of controlled aggression. Love is a luxury, Minyu said. Survival is a necessity. We chose necessity. That's what humans do. And if another threat comes, another swarm or something worse, then we'll be monsters again, Minyu said simply. That's what you keep us for, isn't it? To do the terrible things so you don't have to make the hard choices so you can keep your principles. We don't mind. It's what we're good at. And looked at this man who had saved the galaxy and terrified it in equal measure. Are you happy? For the first time since they'd met, Captain Minyu smiled. It wasn't a nice smile, but it was genuine. Happy isn't the goal, Ambassador. Alive is the goal, everything else is just details. The galaxy moved forward, saved by monsters it would never fully accept. The humans remained on the edges of Council space, ready if needed, distant enough to be ignored the rest of the time. They were the necessary evil, the monsters in the dark, the brutal saviors who did what heroes couldn't. Earth had sent them when the galaxy called for help, and though the galaxy feared them, it also knew the truth. Sometimes you needed monsters to fight monsters, and humanity had plenty to spare.